Perhaps you know Star. Perhaps she's flashed her brilliant smile your way in a classroom or in the writing center. Perhaps you've seen her at the Logan Library, where her poster hangs beside other Logan luminaries. Maybe you've seen her at Helicon West, the reading series she organizes and directs. Perhaps you've heard her read her poems at City Hall, or written poems with her during her monthly poetry walkabouts. She's the first poet laureate of Logan City and an all-star power forward for the Utah Jazz. That was a test. That was actually a test. If you know Star, you know she's not a power forward for the Utah Jazz. She is, however, an all-star power forward for literature, promoting the work of local authors as well as writers from around the country, publishing community broadsides, and overseeing the staff of 74 tutors at 5 writing centers, which is unbelievable. It's no wonder she was recently named Best Utah Literary Leading Lady by City Weekly. She is, as stars must always be, the center of things, a warming presence, one to praise and celebrate. Today we gather to hear her read from her latest collection of poems, Thin Spines of Memory, a book that showcases her deep roots in the Intermountain West and marvelous talent for illuminating moments that might otherwise go unnoticed. In these poems, we walk barefoot with Star down Shale Hill to fields where her family worked the land along Bear River. We carry oats in a bowl, smell fresh hay bales, watch cats slink up the road to a gravel pit. Iris of all colors march down the grassy slopes. These images of a rural life, what Star calls a fruitful harvest of memories, are sweet and melancholy. They remind us of our profound connection to the land and to one another. I'm honored to call Star a friend and colleague and welcome her here today.
Thank you, Ben, for that humbling introduction.
Speaking the truth.
Education of an Idaho farm girl. Into her mind of 2-story clapboard, corner bedroom, braided rug, chenille bedspread, upstairs window unscreened, pond frogs croaking like doors growing open, rusted hinges, white chalk screech on black slate, ladders to the apricots. Into her skin, grit under ivory, bangs cut straight across forehead, gap-toothed church girl, pirouette, aquanet tutu, black tap shoes, forerunner skates, into white, cold, sunstroke hills with cows and demon migraine fainting spells, fast car swerve to semis headlights, flip and roll, hospital bed, bloody insides, into the principal's office, nurse's office, admissions office, college gates. She has come this far. She has left the cows, the fields, the barn, the breeze rushing in. She walks glass-like, thin gold lettering, book-spined, burnished. She is turning away from across the pasture, off the river, down sloping hills, rock-riddled canyons, groaning, whistling, calling her back. She can't go down that road again. She's saying to herself, I knew you then, but oh, I know you better now. First, I want to talk about how I got here. Not just to this book, but to this place, my life, which is, when I think about it, astonishing. It took a lot of people. It still does. I want to thank my poetry group, Brock and Shannon especially, for sticking with me through hundreds of drafts, over 20 years of poetry at 3. I want to thank my colleagues at the Department of English, past and present, who share my love for teaching, who support me in my work and make me feel important to the fabric of this giant tapestry we call USU. I extend my thanks to the faculty and staff of CHAS and other colleges and departments around campus who invite me to give readings and workshops, who appreciate poetry for what it can do for the world. My grateful thanks to James Catlin, who has Coulbrooke and can't be here, who contributed to the cover art, and to Maria Williams, who designed the book. She's in New York and can't be here. And to the editors and publishers who kept me revising each poem long after I thought I was done. There's a poem in the book that was dedicated years ago to a dear friend who fell away from our poetry group and our once close friendship. I want to honor her and two other friends who once were not close but have become so and who can't be here today because of illness, because of cancer treatment. This poem is for those three, with thanks for what they've given me and continue to give, and it's in the book on page 36. Only pears. In a past life, I gathered fruit as it fell from branches that grew up the slender trunk. An inverted umbrella weighted with plump ripened gold. Cows grazed in the pasture by the orchard, pears shining on their own side of the fence. Now the pears drop every season, long before they should, worm-holed and limb-scarred from bare spines. But let's not talk about the fall, the trampled fruit, and early death. Instead, picture pears, bell-shaped and burnished, lifted in a child's hand from orchard bed to lips, deep gold, incredibly sweet. I also want to thank my Writing Center family, my tutors and directors who make me feel valued, who keep the center running smoothly when I'm going in a dozen different directions in this busy intellectual machine called academe. And my profound thanks to the community with a capital C, those groups and businesses and nonprofits and libraries that invite poetry into their midst and promote their very own poet laureate. My thanks to Logan City and the Logan Library for their constant advocacy. My thanks to Jennifer Simon for arranging this meeting and for just being wonderful in all regards. Most of all, I want to thank you, my wonderful audience, for being here today, because you are the reason I published this book. I had to change my life to get here. Before I continue with poems, I want to convey to the students and young people who are here that you can change your life, that you can change your life, no matter where you come from or how you were raised. If you read and you think and you write creatively and with purpose, you have a better chance than most to recover from the things life will hand you. So this will be some poetry therapy. I'm reading from Thin Spines today, but I'm also reading from a couple of other books. One is Walking the Bear, which was published by Outlaw Artists Press, and it's now available for free downloading online from the Marriott Library at U of U. And there's another poetry collection that I'm working on, and it gives you a better idea of how I got here after I left the farm. So it's in progress. I went back to school at 40. I walked out of high school the day I turned 16, married at 17, raised kids for 23 years, enrolled at USU, found my poetry mentor, Ken Brewer, and published my first poem in 1996. This one, it's not in the book. Blood Work. After it happened, she bathed in the dark. Couldn't stand to see blood in the water, red against porcelain. Even on bronze or stainless steel, she hated the sight of it splashing the bowl. had a cesarean 2 decades later, saw her blood ooze between surgical staples, felt her mouth fill with it, pictured the way it had oozed from between broken teeth, bruised lips, the sliminess, platelets trying to clot. At the hospital, tubes, the transfusion, a trail of red. Her mother described it in detail when they tested her blood. It made the treatment a morbid game. Watch the nurse, darling. That's how they draw blood. See how dark it is going into the tube. Instead, she fainted, woke up remembering parts of what happened, pictured in frames, a horror show, her mind an old-time projector. Scenes flicker in black, white, red. Take her back to the dark motel, to the bathroom where her blood meets porcelain. Her baby falls out in the water. Their blood rubs onto the toilet seat, drips down the floor, trails down the hall, runs pink in the shower later. Every month for years, she felt the pressure, smelled the blood, held it close in her hand, slick and warm on her fingers, already recalling how blood saturates, how it tastes in her mouth, pools on her skin, dries into scabs, flakes off like rust. Couldn't remember forever after which was the rape, which the miscarriage. However our lives turn out, whatever happens to make us who we are, the events of our childhood and how we react to them sets us up for certain behaviors and scenarios that tend to repeat over the decades. Those of us who are lucky will find someone or something that helps us look deeply into ourselves and makes us into the people we really want to be. For me, poetry was that something. It saved my life by giving me an outlet for emotional trauma. It enabled me to look closely at what I'd gone through as a young girl on the farm. This next one is in the book. It's called River Once Removed. Barefoot, I walk the steel pipe that carries water down shale hill to fields where my family worked the land along Bear River. The siphoned silver coolness sings beneath my feet, metallic pings reverberating down the valley, river curving through cottonwoods, pastures dotted with cattle. Cold shoots up my ankles like the ache of memory, shifting, changing course, shallowing to gentle riffles. Gone the old swimming hole where the river bent and split for an island of trees, a place to pull from floating, lie back in the shade on a still, hot day. At 10 years old, I skinny dipped with my sister, hiding from brothers who told on us, boy cousins who spied. We snaked out of suits, water swirling over skin, bellies gritty with sand, scraped by rocks, carp, driftwood. Uncles taught us to catch crawfish, turn over rocks and grab fast, squeeze hard at the back where arms connect, so claws wave and grasp. We hooked their soft bellies for fishing, gathered rock rollers, left night crawlers for town kids, for cousins who didn't know better, cousins once removed, girls who wore two-piece bathing suits, drank gin, smoked cigarettes, and told us about sex that I'd already guessed. Run the river down my legs, pull the river from my hair, wipe the river from my face. At 12, my life began to shift, erode its banks. Crawfish disappeared. Cousins got pregnant or died too young. My mother, who could never save me, went to work to keep the farm. Sisters married and gone. Dad dead from cancer. At 13, I left the river, left the family, the farm, that troubled world. Left the cousins, boys who touched my breasts, men who held me underwater, left the valley that carried the river, that carried them into me. Slapping my feet on the siphon, I smooth the riffles in my mind, remember 13, 12, and 10. Remember the way I constructed my island, the moss, the grass, the rocks all around, the places I cushioned, the roar, the necessary hardness. If there's a prominent thread in my farm girl poetry, it would be loss. Loss of innocence, loss of family members to death by cancer, and the resulting loss of parental care. When my dad died, my mother, who had always been there for us kids, had to get a job in town, so she was suddenly gone from us for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. We were instantly orphaned. When I asked my mother many years later what had killed my dad, she said it was the chlorine. That was the chemical my dad used to spray the alfalfa for beetles. It was banned in 1988, 26 years after he died. He sprayed our fields and other farmers' fields on his little Ford tractor with the spray arms open to the wind. Mother said, I thought something was wrong when he would come home sick. And then the willow died at the spring where he washed the rocks. That's when I knew. So, at the spring. Did you know watercress? Okay, I've got some nods and some I don't know. It's this dark, leafy green plant with a slightly bitter flavor, and it grows in water, and it grew in our spring. We used to pick it fresh and eat it when I was a kid. And this is a poem from the book about that. Early death. Watercress thrives at the spring where he washed his spray rods, home from saving the hay with beetle-killing chlordane, poison arcing over the fields, fine mist drifting into his lungs. Forever after, his tractor was driven by others, his sons and then the neighbors who bought it, along with the cows, the hay, the grain, and all the barn equipment. Gone his tools from the shed, the vise, the grinding stone, anvil, and bellows. Gone his clothes from the bedroom closet, his Sunday shoes, tie tacks and cufflinks, his razor, comb, and shaving kit, the soft brush he used to apply a foam lather. Gone his flashing gold tooth. We stopped eating watercress. 50 years later, it thrives there, its peppery flavor recalled as if we had never quit picking it, never quit layering its vivid green between dense, chunky slices of mother's homemade bread, spread with butter, sprinkled with salt and black pepper. Eyeing the green leaves thriving under spouting water piped in from the mountain's arteries, we don't dare break a stem to try. Memory, not the fear of dying, holds us back. Our tongues, on our tongues, the flavors mingle, peppery and fresh. So farm life was hard, even without death and unpreventable abandonment. It's no wonder certain young farm girls dreamed about getting married to city boys, thinking they might escape hardship. This is called fringe. I sit at the crooked desk in the adult education classroom, mesmerized by the purple fringe at the wrists of my blouse sleeves, watching it drag across my notebook as I write, the way it might have if I'd worn this blouse years ago in the high school homeroom, where I penned his name over and over and inserted Mrs. in front of it, as if it were something I could magically become at only 14, the thing every girl I knew imagined in the innocence of pre-connubial bliss, a new name scrawled across her future like embroidery on trousseau. When I moved to the big city, that was Logan. Even Preston was a big city. I lived out on the farm and Preston was big, but Logan, wow. I thought I left all my fears and insecurities and naivety behind. And just like on the farm in the River Once Removed poem, I was taken advantage of by others. I didn't know how to stop it, didn't know I had a choice to do so. It was the way things were back then. And so I had to make my mistakes and learn from them and decide how to live. I became self-sufficient. I had a husband who was emotionally unavailable, and I had 3 kids who depended on me. I cooked their meals and sewed their clothes and cut their hair and mine, worked as a waitress to buy school supplies, went to parent-teacher conferences, took the kids to dance lessons and soccer games. You know how a car is, those of you who've been taking kids around? My car always turned at Tuller School of Dance, no matter where I was going. It's automatic. You know what I mean. I played Tooth Fairy and Easter Bunny and Santa Claus while the kids' dad was unable to be there. And I was too young to be a proper mom. And when they left home, so did I. And here's a poem from my next book, and it's called Permanent. 21 years since the new hairdo, since she whacked off the curls cascading down her neck. Instead, short spikes, tossed every which way. Just in case, she saved the perm rods, 3 sizes with 3x3 papers and flip-over elastic keepers. Saved them in a plastic cosmetic bag, 80s style, foil mirror, white linen, lash flash. Also in the bag, a box of powder too dark for her complexion, 21 years of hats and sunscreen, no more worshiping the deep tanned hide of youth, hard mistakes bound for the secondhand store. How odd, she thinks, the things we save. How strange to note the permanence of shedding our own skin. I want to stop here and think about some of the ways in which we shed our own skin. As I said, my way is poetry. And as poet laureate, I like to give others an opportunity to create poems. And we would do that right now if we had time, because that's what I like to do best. Give a prompt and then people write poems and then they send them to me. And then I create a community collaborative poem with them. And I read it to the city every August at the city council meeting. And it has all of your lines. It has a line or a word or even a thought from all of the people who contribute their poems to me. And it turns out to be pretty fantastic. The last one had 30 contributors. They're great. They're a lot of fun. You should come on Poetry Walkabouts, which we won't have again until May. April or May, because it's dark and cold and icy in winter, so we don't go. But it's something to think about for spring. We usually start with the May Swenson Memorial Poetry Walkabout, because May Swenson is Logan's most famous poet. And she went to New York and just wrote poems. Wouldn't that be something? You just don't do that anymore. We didn't do it back then, but maybe. So here's a poem that I drafted on the Urban Naturalist Walkabout to Garth Gardens in September of 2015. And Brock got a really amazing poem out of that Garth Gardens walk. Is it still called The Ogre? And it's about eating a rose that you and Shannon were admiring. But anyway, this poem fits the Thin Spines volume quite nicely because it's about nature. Birch. What happened here? Your smooth-veined leaves all shattered. Was it hail? When the wind came hard through the park, heavy, hot summer alight with flashes of fire coursing up from grass and stone, what happened when it forked? Its crooked lines crazing dark sky, the howl of it like metal, then pelting hail, those hard chunks slicing down like falling stars. Your leaves of filigree on half-bare limbs, a scree of green around your trunk. That's it, that's all it is. I like the way that poem brings us back to nature, though, because that's where I went to escape the troubled world I spoke of in the River Once Removed poem. And Here's a Nature in the City poem about that, and it's called Summer Notebook. Oh, it's not in the book, it's in the Summer Notebook. The summer I was 40, I hacked myself right out of a marriage, its chasms and rocky ledges, no fight left in me, only flight from coiled knees. The summer after my divorce, I wandered the desert hunting rocks and lizards with my lover and had a nervous breakdown working at a nursing home where scorpions nested in diaper boxes and patients fell out of their chairs waiting for me as I hurried like I do in bad dreams. The faster I run, the more I can't get where I'm going. The summer my daughter was 5. She played the wear your clothes backward game in her silly opposite of what you mean club, donned cast-off hats and mismatched shoes, hid them in the shrubs on the corner before she caught the bus to school. An artist called her on stage, embarrassing her older sister, wanted to sketch her, embarrassed her older sister, made me think of freedom, of what it would cost to be as impetuous as a 5-year-old. That 5-year-old, by the way, is now 40. She helped save me, and she made her own way in the world, and I thank her every day for who she is. And my final 2 thank yous go to my siblings, especially my little sister Leanne, who loved the farm and the animals, wild and tame, and made sure she and her husband Clyde that it stayed in the family. It's been in the family since 1890. And to my partner Mitch, who is emotionally available. He rolled his eyes right there. And has stuck with me for 25 years, damn near 26, and who makes me laugh when I get too serious. How nice to have grown together as couples, beyond the teenage angst and the young marriage and midlife crises, and even menopause, to come out at the end of it wondering what happened. This final poem is for them and for Dad and for you, and thanks for coming today. And it's called Ode. It was published recently in Not Very Quiet, which is a magazine out of Australia with a feminist bent. And so this poem is called Ode with a feminist nod to Fern Hill. Oh, I sang like the sea when I was young and supple and innocent with lust. Thus was my season, spring in its tulips, in its cups, all butter yellow atop the freshest green, spring. The golden sap ran sugar fine and pleasure tasted heady, pulsing where the skin touched air, spectacular desire, the way it was so long ago, when love was green and golden, easy in the windfall light. Here on the other side, Indian summer, deep red and bittersweet, ripening to rot. Was that the all of it? What now at 65, as mercy edges further south, every leaf and seed pod rattling its bones? I'll take them. I'm terrible at ad-libbing though, so make them easy.
You told me once you'd read some poems your mother had written. Did she ever get to read any of yours?
She did. She did read some of my poems. She was very proud of me. And when I changed my name to Star, when I didn't use any of the names I'd ever had before, and I became Star Coulbrooke, my mother was the first to really use that name and love that name. She said, that's just who you are. She said that she wanted to name me Melody. She told me that when I was 24. She said, I wanted to name you Melody, but your dad didn't want me to, so we named you this. other things. So when I changed my name to Star, I think it really made her happy. But yeah, she did read some of my poems. And she read a couple of her poems to me, but I wanted to record her reading them, and I turned on the recorder, and then she couldn't read them. She said her voice, she didn't have a voice. So I'm very happy that I get to read some out loud. Maybe she can hear me somewhere.
Can you talk about how your presence of embodiment influences the way you write or the way you respond to the world, and then how you bring that to your writing?
What do you mean?
The presence, like your sense of being a sensual being in the world.
That's a hard question.
I just wonder if you might have
don't ask hard enough.
Oh, sorry.
That's why I love you. You always ask the hard question. I don't know. I feel like when you have poems inside and they actually come out, they're really a part of you. And they're the part that you really can't ever say, you really can't articulate properly, unless you have some kind of removed way of getting at them. Some lyrical, musical thing that comes up from inside. And if I write a poem, that's what has to be there. And I have to have it there whether I'm writing on paper, which is what I most often do, or writing by computer, which isn't very often, or revising. If you don't have that being for poetry inside when you're revising, your revisions fail, which is why I have to revise so many times, because sometimes you're under a deadline, you can't do it, and then you're pressured. Although there is one thing, and that's when I'm asked to write a poem, and I gather a lot of words and things from people, then I think that has a completely different kind of feeling, and so it has a different embodiment. That's nice to think about. I haven't before now. Yeah, thanks for that hard question. You're an artist, so you know. Charles.
I'm curious about what happens for you when you became Logan City Poet Laureate, and you started thinking about writing poems not just for yourself, but for a whole community. Did that change some part of your process, or did it change just how you were thinking about the poems? And what shifted inside of you as you started writing for this, for a bigger sense of self, I guess?
You know, it was actually quite freeing, because writing for someone or something else, I could do research, and I could go and I could find things that had already been written about or talked about, or people would give me their stories, and it seems like that's a little bit easier for me to compile, and it seems like it really just rolls on its own, because it's almost like, oh, my mother loved to bake cookies for people. It's almost like baking cookies for someone you love. You just do it, and it feels so pleasurable. Yeah, it was kind of cool. Ben.
Yeah, I might sort of follow up on that with regard to the Poet Laureate position. I'm wondering what you've learned about Logan and the people you've worked with through this position, and taking some of their words and their ideas and integrating. I imagine you've learned some things about a place that you've lived for quite a long time that maybe you didn't know before.
I have learned a lot of things. I love going and finding those little spaces that I didn't ever know about, those little tiny parks and little areas where I never had a chance to walk, because I always thought you had to do the great big hikes up in the mountains. I didn't know you could just walk around it. And I've walked around a lot because I love to walk, but finding those places was good. And something else I learned was how beloved everyone is in this place. People are so amazing in this big city, small town. A lot of people know a lot of people here. And I think everyone's heart is in the right place. in this town. I think that I've learned that no matter what our political, religious, philosophical, anything else persuasion, there's always something to appreciate about the people in this town. Each individual one brings something that's really important.
As a memoirist, I often think about what I, as my older self, would say to or think about even as my younger self. And I'm wondering, when you cast back to that younger self, that 7 or 8-year-old, or 10 or 12, or even 14, like what are the things that you say to her, and how would you, I don't know, encourage her or ask her? I mean, the thing that's so amazing, and so many things are amazing about her, but one of them is your self-determination. I mean, it's really deciding at a point in your life that this was not okay and you were going to do something else. And that is all about risk-taking and courage. But it took you a while to get to that place. So I'm wondering what you would say to that younger self, what advice you would give her.
Just do what you did. A lot of it was terrible, and I think in a lot of regards it has to be in order to get to where you are in life. All of the experiences are supremely valuable. And so every time I write a poem that has that younger self, it's so much
I have two kind of related questions. One is kind of practical and one is a little deeper. The practical one is when you write more autobiographical poems, are you one of the poets who really sticks to the facts, or do you make stuff up? And like I do sometimes. And the second one is a lot of people, have said art comes out of pain, and I wondered if you feel like the suffering that you've been through played a role in making you a poet.
Yes, it comes out of pain and it comes out of joy. And yes, everything that I write is autobiographical in some regard and totally out there in another place, but linking to that. So for instance, I remember that once you were reading a manuscript that you were so kind as to give me great comments on parts of it, or in this book, and parts will be in the next book. And you said something about, oh gosh, I'm sorry I didn't know about that one thing. And it was about, the poem is called Glistening, and it starts with my husband, and it says things about my husband. And it talked about many things, violence, Vietnam, suicide, those kinds of things. And all of those things were true. And some of those things didn't happen specifically to that specific husband, but were so completely lived by the speaker of the poem that yes, it was completely autobiographical. It's all tangled up and convoluted, isn't it? And whatever image makes the truth come clear is just not the truth. Poems are the truth, not just facts. So that's how I look at that. Yeah. I think it's probably time to have a snack, some work. Thanks again.